We are live, sir.
You didn't give me a countdown.
I did not.
Threw me for a loop there, John.
I know.
No,
I know.
3, 2, 1. Whoa.
3, 2, 1.
Is that April Fool's? Is that what you just did to me?
I was planning that all day.
You know, every single year I tell everybody on the 30th of March, I tell myself, I'm not going to get got this year.
Right.
And you just got me.
Boom.
All day long, I was good. You got me. You have one shout out because I don't have any because we have an incredible guest on again today, and I have so much to chat with.
Absolutely.
To them. So I'll let you do your shout out, and I'll get to it.
All right. Very good. Well, this is Primetime #1 for us, which I'm very excited about. But yesterday, March 31st, a very good friend of mine turned 50. His name is Timmy. Tim, happy birthday, sir. And today, his beautiful mom turned 40.
40.
She's hanging around 40. And happy birthday to you as well. Great lady, great mom, and just really cool. So happy birthday.
And I know Tim's a big fan of the show, so happy birthday, Tim.
He is.
He watches almost every week.
Very supportive. Yeah. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. Make
Awesome.
this short because we do want to get in.
I have no shout outs. I have a long introduction for our esteemed guest again.
Excellent.
I'm not going to goof it up this time. Last time I said he was a politician, he corrected me. He's a lifelong public servant. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about why he doesn't call himself a politician. Mm-hmm. He served as a law enforcement officer for a large part of his career. He's most recently been a candidate for mayor at the city of Chicago. He's previously been a commander of several different precincts in New York City. And if I'm wrong, I know he's going to correct me. He became the deputy commissioner of operations in New York City. He was at Ground Zero during September 11th in New York. He took over the Newark Police Department, where just like in New York, crime drastically got reduced. He then became the police superintendent for the city of Chicago. And as I mentioned, he ran for mayor. We have a really important mayor runoff tomorrow between Tony Preckwinkle and Lori Lightfoot. And Mr. McCarthy was kind enough to come back and chat with us about his experiences for the election, Chicago politics. We'll talk about Jesse a little bit because that's a hot topic, and I know he wants to touch on it. John for sure wants to touch on it. But did I goof that up, Gary, or did I get it right this time?
No, you did fine. As a matter of fact, I think we're done, right?
I think we're done. He's like, I'm out of here. See you guys. Thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure.
Let's start with your experience running for mayor and ups, downs, positives, negatives.
So, I did it for almost a year, unlike people like Tony Preckwinkle, who did it for 4 months after Rahm dropped out. Very, very disappointing. I kind of had fun because I like speaking truth to power. I don't hold my tongue. And I got to tell a lot of people a lot of things that they didn't want to hear, but were necessary. And that I found refreshing, cathartic, if you will. I love talking to people, so it was a lot of fun for me. Everywhere I went, it wasn't like I was working at campaigning. It was just being Garry and, talking to people and having a good time. So that part of it was fun. It was very disappointing the way it ended up, obviously. Because I did it, in my book, for the right reasons. I did it because I wanted to make a difference. I did it because I couldn't stand by and watch what was happening in this city. And in the end, I have a decent relationship, a good relationship with Lori Lightfoot. I have no relationship with Tony Preckwinkle. But they're both two left-sided progressive candidates. And I thought the city was ready to go in a different direction. I thought we were tired of people dying. I thought we were tired of the politics as usual. And what it turned out to be, and I realized this as it was happening, it's tribal warfare politics in this city. If you're in this tribe, that's where you're going. If you're in that tribe, that's where you're going. And people came to the table. Bill Daley came to the table with the Daley crew. Mendoza came to the table with her crew, and Tony Preckwinkle came with hers. And that just kind of blew a whole bunch of things up. And people looked at the election, and so many people running for office, and the low turnout and the tribal warfare just turned it into a farce in my book. So, and that's not even talking about the whole press thing. I mean, that's a whole nother issue that we could spend an hour talking about. But the press was trying to anoint the mayor, not elect one.
Yeah.
They stopped paying attention to virtually every candidate except for 4 of them. And at the end of the day, it didn't work. And I could give you example after example of things that they did. One of our papers did 4 out of 5 days. They did negative articles on me when I explained the law of felony murder, which had it that the 2 officers who got hit by the train while they were pursuing the guy who was firing shots, which I think I heard people say was just a minor transgression, I should say, firing shots in a public arena. When they got killed by that train, that individual could have been charged with felony murder.
Sure.
Now, that's not my opinion. That's the law.
Right. It's factual.
Right. Yet I got castigated 4 days out of 5 by the Sun-Times. And when we tried to respond, they wouldn't take an op-ed from me. So it really phenomenal. And then, some other things that the Tribune did and some of the other radio stations, it's really, they're part of the problem. And it's really, it pains my heart to see that we're in the place that we're in. But I understand why we are. It's because of the processes that we use and those things right there. And, it's kind of like, not really an aha, but I thought that we were over it. I thought we were done with the things that put us in this place and we were ready to move on.
Yeah, there's a lot to digest there, but I think the overlying thought is Chicago itself didn't really want change. And low voter turnout, the Chicago political machine, like you said, it's you equate it to tribal warfare. Sometimes not taking your opposition piece to that. Chicago just doesn't want change. And one thing that was, and I've said this a couple times, John reached out to everybody to see if they would come and talk to us. And we're a tiny little operation, and you were the only person that gave a crap to come talk to the average person. Yep. And to me, I kept telling anybody that would listen, the Chicago politicians don't seem, at least in my book and our experiences, to care to talk to the average person. You were gracious with your time. You spoke to us. You spoke to us after the show. And then watching you out in public, like you said, you're just talking to people. And then seeing how the first election turned out, it just seems like the city itself, and it's sad, doesn't want change. It's an awful place to be for somebody who, and this is another bone I have to pick with the whole process. John and I spoke about this too. I have a couple businesses in Chicago, but I live in the northern suburbs now, and I don't even have a vote, even though what happens in Chicago really badly affects me, maybe more so than somebody who's renting an apartment here. And no knock to that, but I'm affected so dramatically. But my hands were tied. I could just get the voice out. But it seems like Chicago didn't want any change.
Well, the system is rigged. I mean, it seriously is, and I'm going to give you a number of examples.
Sure.
First of all, the February election. It's the only general election in the country in February. In Chicago. Now, why would you have an election in February in Chicago? Well, to have a low voter turnout so that the machine or the incumbent has the upper hand.
It's interesting.
That's first. Second of all, if you want to become the governor of the state of Illinois, to get on the ballot, you have to collect 5,000 valid signatures. Yet to become the mayor of the city of Chicago, in Illinois, you have to collect 12,500.
Oh.
And there's 60 different ways to knock a signature off a petition. 60. So to make sure that we got 12,500, we collected 60,000. And we only submitted 50,000. So the petition process is a problem. But then the other thing is special interests and unions should not be allowed to make campaign donations, period.
Yeah.
Because that's just buying an elected official. And we saw it with SEIU and CTU giving Tony Preckwinkle, I think, $2 million. How about Ken Griffin giving Bill Daley $2 million back to back? It's just insanity and just very disappointing. Yeah. Very disappointing. And I'm a manager, right? I managed God knows how many people in a 35-year career. I've been a manager since 1985 when I made sergeant in the NYPD. And the way that we reduce crime in policing is through business management, systems management to produce outcomes that you're looking for. You put your inputs in, you set up your internal systems, you manage them, and you get your outputs. So the thing that I say all the time is the system will produce what the system is designed to produce, and that's what we're seeing here in Chicago.
Same results over and over.
Yeah, yeah. It's not going to change. You know, and I used to have the discussion with my wife. I wouldn't say an argument because I can't argue with her. She's a trial lawyer. It's a waste of time. And she would say, Gary, it's never going to change. And I would say, it's not going to change until somebody changes it. And everywhere I went, that's what I heard. People said we need change. People said we need change. Now, having said that, you know, Tony Preckwinkle or Lori Lightfoot are going to be a change from it. Tony Preckwinkle is the machine politician now, but it's a different machine than we're accustomed to here in Chicago.
Right.
And Lori is very progressive. I like her a lot. We don't agree politically on a lot of issues, but she and I did very well when she was in charge of the police board, and I was the police superintendent. We worked very well together, and I anticipate that Lori will get things done around here that haven't been done in a long time. But I'm a little nervous about how far left we're going to go.
Right.
And that's not law and order, and that's really concerning to me. And that's what we see, and I hate to go right there, but that's what we see now with Kim Foxx. That's the left-leaning agendas that want to keep people out of jail instead of holding them accountable for their behaviors. Accountability does not only apply to the police, but apparently that's what we do here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Elected officials aren't accountable for what they do. That's why we had 4 sitting aldermen with legal troubles at the time of the February 26th election, and they're not accountable to their constituents. So...
Well, you did a good bump and set into this. Let's get into the Kim Foxx thing. I'll take your take on it. I think we have a very similar take on what happened there. We spoke before we went on air about how the process really wasn't even a legal process of her recusing herself. So I'll let you kind of explain that.
Yeah, to recuse yourself, you have to petition a judge. She didn't do that. She just said, I'm recusing myself, and then she went to the Oscars.
Yeah.
Right? And nobody seems to have a problem with that, which really blows my mind. She's got a crisis. She's got a high-profile heater case in her office, and she steps out and goes to California to party. So that tells you something about her character. But the problem is, and my first spin on this, Kim Foxx is a puppet for Tony Preckwinkle.
Yep.
Tony Preckwinkle put her in office. Tony Preckwinkle's machine is behind her. And I thought from the beginning that this is some sort of a political move by Preckwinkle to garner some political capital in that progressive world that wants to keep people out of jail. But now, with Michelle Obama's chief of staff involved, I don't know how far this thing goes, but it definitely needs a DOJ investigation, I can tell you that. She didn't follow process. You don't just dismiss charges like that after a 16-count indictment.
Right.
And if the nonsense excuse that we're hearing today is that, well, that case was falling apart, that's why the prosecutors want people to go to a grand jury to lock them in with their testimony. And that's the end of it.
Right.
You can't change your story once it's on paper and on audio.
You're impeached, as we call it in law.
Yeah. So, this whole thing stinks. The whole thing stinks. And the problem is, here's just another thing that people don't realize. We may have spoken about this last time. But everybody talks about the low homicide clearance rate here in Chicago. Kim Foxx will not charge people. And that has something to do with the clearance rate. That's how you clear a case. I identify the criminal. I charge him. I arrest him. We prosecute him. The case is cleared. If you can't charge them, that's a vast majority of the cases that are not going to be cleared. So, I mean, if you don't put criminals in jail, they keep committing crime. And, that's all part of the problem that we have here.
Yeah, the whole thing, John and I actually spoke about this when we were at dinner earlier. We said, to me, it was astonishing. I have a legal background. I have a law degree. That it got to a grand jury indictment and then got thrown out. At that point, if you've gone through all 16 counts, him being indicted on all 16 counts, there's evidence there to move forward and prosecute somebody. It almost sets a frightening precedent now that you could actually get through that whole process, have charges thrown out, and then say, well, it was a nonviolent crime. Well, me going 100 miles an hour is a nonviolent crime, but it's a crime nonetheless. You can't not punish that. And yeah, now with...
if you were drinking, it would be a crime.
Right.
And if you ran somebody over, it would be a crime also.
Right.
So to prevent that from happening, you get charged when you drive 100 miles an hour.
Right.
But that's
It's a
not what we
process.
do here. The other thing that I find fascinating about this is that, Mo, you talked about the fact that you're a lawyer. My wife is a lawyer, like I said, and she and all her friends are so upset with the lack of integrity that we're seeing and the lack of due process being followed by the state's attorney. And I think it was the Illinois Bar Association came out with a 2-pager that I read yesterday or the day before that laid out the best practices in lawyering, if you will, and how to handle these high-profile cases and what you should and shouldn't do. And everything they said you should do, Kim Foxx didn't do, and everything they said you shouldn't do, Kim Foxx did do.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. It's just Chicago, I guess. That's the only thing I could say. The phone calls and text messages and emails that I'm getting from my friends across the country, everybody's like, what the heck is going on out there?
Yeah. Well, I was leaving Mexico last week when we were in the airport. We were sitting next to people that were going outside of Chicago, and the news had actually just dropped the same day I was flying that the charges were dropped, and somebody laughed and said, you guys are from Chicago. Apparently laws don't count there in Chicago, and they were sending me obviously all the R. Kelly photos, and R. Kelly's happy this happened. He needs the same attorney.
Yeah, I heard Chapo's trying to get his trial here.
Yeah, moved to Chicago. We're dropping charges in Chicago. That was the meme. But the other thing I heard again when I was out of the country was, is Chicago safe? We spoke about it last time you were on, and again, I flew out of the country, and in a country where people presume there's a safety issue, Mexico, people are asking, is Chicago safe? And somebody had just asked, does Garry see himself taking any active roles to help bring change to the city post-election? It's something we chatted about. But what do you think the city needs to do to help bring the crime rate back down? Because you were doing a damn good job of it, and now it's going back in the other direction. What does the city have to do? And to answer his question, and anything you want to do post-election to have an active role?
Well, this is really hard for me because I spent 35 years as a police officer. It was definitely what I was supposed to be doing in my life. I had enormous success just about everywhere I went. Very fortunate all at the same time, and that's why I advanced as far as I did in my career. You have to be lucky and good if you're going to succeed, And I mean, that's why I ran for office, is because I hate to see what's going on here. And, if asked, it would be very difficult for me not to help out in some fashion. Does that mean I want to be the police superintendent again? Absolutely not. But, if there's some way that I could help, I will, because that's how I am. So, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm focused on building my business back up. As I told you guys, this election cost me a heck of a lot of money and lost salary and money out of my pocket and Kristen's pocket. So it's going to take me a while to get back from that because, I'm not the guy who came into the campaign with $5 million in my pocket.
And I think that's the piece that a lot of people are missing. You're a hardworking guy that had a business and you ran to make change. You didn't come in here and say, okay, I got, like you said, $5 million, and if I lose this thing,
I'm not entitled to be the mayor.
Yeah, not entitled enough to be the mayor. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's I think people don't realize how much. And you, like you said, you ran very early. You said from the get-go, I'm going to run because of Rom.
I was the second person to declare.
Right.
First person was Troy Lavriere, who couldn't get the signatures.
So
And
you
he
were
dropped
the really the first person who ended up on the ballot who
Yeah.
said they would run.
Yep.
And you said you were going to run against Rom, and you ran a long campaign. And like you said, if you're a business person with a wife, kids, and a family, and you're relying on your income and your work, the sacrifice you made to get to a place where Chicago then didn't want change. I mean, for me, it would make me very I don't want to say down on the process, but more not trusting of the process.
Yeah.
It's not. It almost doesn't become worth it.
Maybe.
Well, you said it well. You said if somebody asked me, it'd be very hard because you've been such a great public servant for so long. But I would look at it like, if I put myself in your shoes, if the city doesn't want change, if there's this tribal kind of warfare going on, I wouldn't sacrifice, everything else to do it again.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm the eternal optimist.
Yeah,
and that's a character flaw, because many times I'm too trusting of people, which is kind of odd considering, my background and all the experiences I've had.
Yeah.
I used to joke that somebody said that they would stick a knife in my back, but there's no more room. I mean, I've been down those roads too many times, but yet I still, I don't know, I still think better of people, and I'm just shocked that we are where we are.
Well, John has a question. You want to ask it, John?
No math, please.
Okay, yeah, it's no math. He goes, your thoughts on Rahm? What, did you bump and set that one for him?
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts on Rahm?
Your thoughts on Rahm?
I almost threw up in my mouth when I saw his righteous indignation about the Jussie Smollett case.
I was going to ask you, if you hadn't touched on it after you gave your thoughts, I was going to ask your thoughts on that, because that was the first thing I saw when I boarded the plane was his quick statement.
Yeah, the same guy who got up in front of the city council and cried after he fired me saying, "I'm sorry." And you know what? Only one reporter asked him the question, "Well, what are you sorry for?" And no, I'm sorry. One reporter asked him, "What did I do that I got fired?" And then nobody asked him what he was sorry for. Because if they asked him, he would have said, "I'm sorry I took the advice of my corporation counsel and hid that video." That's what he would have said. And we would have been in an entirely different place.
Yeah.
But, his righteous indignation. And I got a kick out of it the other day. I was on another radio show, and they asked me, was Rahm telling the truth when he got up there and when he was so angry and so on? And I couldn't help myself. I said, "Were his lips moving?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, then take it for what it is."
Does that answer your question well, John?
Pretty much.
I could go a lot further, but I probably shouldn't.
No, that's fine. Just wanted the general overview, see what you thought, because I knew the history. But,
Well, I could tell you this. And I'm being serious about this.
Okay.
In my police career, I've interviewed murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. And I can tell you that in most cases they have more integrity than other people who we might be talking about, because they had circumstances that put them into those places. I'll never make an excuse for a criminal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not making an excuse for them. But I have an understanding as to how they got there. Mm-hmm. This guy chooses to be the way he is. He doesn't have to be like that. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth on the North Shore.
Yeah.
All right, then.
Well answered.
Yes, very, very
I think it's the answer that John wanted, too. He's smiling back there. So, obviously, I think neither one of the candidates are going to do the job you did on the crime front. And it's complex, like you said last time. What about some of the other stuff? Schools. Obviously we have some issues with inner city schools and funding. Do you think that that's going to be an issue that's going to get better in this term? Do you think it's going to be one that's campaigned about but forgotten about once the campaign ends?
Well, let me start from the beginning, which is if Preckwinkle becomes the mayor, it's going to get worse because she'll be owned by the CTU, right? So let's start there. And if the CTU spent half as much time putting their effort into teaching the children instead of their political front, I think we'd be in a much better place. And the teachers who I speak to don't support the CTU and their politics, but they're arm twisted into participating in it. So, that's just a flawed system right there. And if the CTU has influence over the mayor, then it's not going to get any better. Yeah. It's not going to get any better. And the more I dove into the schools, the worse I saw it got. The reason why we have so many sex abuse scandals is because the system of reporting it. If a child gets sexually abused in a school today, it doesn't get reported to the police until after it's investigated internally by the school system.
Insanity.
Of course it's insanity. Of course it's insanity. The first thing I said was there has to be an immediate notification to the police.
Well, people who will investigate it appropriately and without bias.
You know, just like making a false report. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But, you know, the last thing that I want to say about the Smollett thing is the reckless nature of what he did. It's not like we don't have a race problem in this city.
Right.
And if that was the match that lit the gasoline, imagine how bad that could have been.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? If people started going out and rioting based upon this incident allegedly happening.
Mm-hmm.
So the reckless nature of it also has to be realized. It's not like you got drunk and reported your car stolen because you didn't know where you parked it, which, by the way, happens more than you know. And we're probably better off that those people can't find their cars.
Yeah.
But by the same token, this is a very serious thing.
Very.
And, you know, as you noticed, as soon as it happened, everybody jumped on board. This is a modern-day lynching and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. All the elected officials and politicians came out screaming about it. And then when we find out that it's not true, you got to hold the person accountable who did it. But instead, now the person who did it has righteous indignation, talking about suing the police, which, by the way, to be clear, the investigation was supervised by the state's attorney's office. The indictment was brought by the state's attorney's office. So, you know, again, Chicago PD is getting kicked in the butt for something that somebody else did. And that's not okay.
And I think that's what people, the average layperson might not understand. The indictment was brought by the state's attorney's office. A couple people said, well, the police are charging them with this. And I said, you're not understanding how the process of this situation worked. And I agree with you. It's reckless in the sense that there's a huge racial issue in the city. And what you've basically done is you're almost like the boy who cried wolf now. So, it takes away the legitimacy of some people who really had an issue. And B, you're a person who has a gigantic following. I mean, I don't watch Empire, but he's by all means a pretty popular guy. How reckless was it that you would... First of all, one of those stupid crimes we were John and I were laughing about, like, if you could think of how stupid of a process of that crime you set in motion. It was a stupid crime, but how reckless it was to do something like that. Like you said, I didn't even think about it, but if that had started a riot where somebody had been killed or something had been burnt to the ground or multiple people had been killed, police officers had been killed, bystanders would have been killed, and you made that up, that has to be punished. I mean, it's outlandish that it's not being punished.
Yeah.
I think it is. I mean, they were saying he's not violent, but he is inciting violence inside people at a very aggressive level. It's I never thought about it that way, but yeah, it's crazy.
Well, back to the schools. I think that's what.
Yeah, back to the schools. I mean, what could they do?
I think under Lori, we have a shot to get it better. Quite frankly, Lori is very thoughtful, very intelligent, and I have high expectations, even if we don't agree politically, for her administration.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I mean, it's again, I can't vote tomorrow, but you know, you've lived this election out very intimately, and you've got to know both candidates on a level that the viewers probably, actually, definitely don't know on that level. And the fact that you think that she can affect some change, I hope tomorrow she comes out victorious and we can see at least some change. If we have forward motion, that makes me happy. It's we were talking in the office earlier today, and I said, you know, whoever your elected leader is, you want to see them do well. It's like asking your pilot, you know, saying, oh, I hate my pilot, I don't want him to land the plane well. It's crazy. So whoever it ends up being elected, I hope they do better for the city because we need better.
Yeah, and you know, people say I don't like either one, so I'm not going to vote. That's the wrong thing to do.
Yeah,
that's the wrong thing to do. And just to be clear, Lori and I worked together, and we had a very good working relationship when she was with the police board and I was the superintendent. Like I said, she's very thoughtful, very intelligent, definitely hardworking, and you know, she's way further left than I am, but so that's okay. This is the United States. It's supposed to be like that. I can't say that about Preckwinkle. I can tell you that if she wins the election, it's shut off the lights and the last guy out grabbed the flag. That's what I honestly think.
Now, Lori won the first round in votes, correct? She was ahead.
Yes.
Do you think now the rest of the votes of the rest of the candidates will sort itself out similar, or do you think they could go against Lori in this situation?
I think that most of the candidates would be backing Lori.
Lori,
As a matter of fact, I think just about every one of them did.
really?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Anybody who gave an endorsement, I'm pretty certain gave it to Lori.
interesting. Well,
Well,
positive.
but look, one of the strikes against Tony is the fact that she's a political opportunist who jumped into this when Rahm jumped out. She's not doing it for anybody who lives in the city except for herself. And she's a machine candidate. She's the chair of the Democratic Party. She ran for 2 offices at the same time. She's had scandal after scandal after scandal on her watch. And if you think that she could do a better job than Lori, take a look at what's happening in the county. How's that going on? And the other thing that I find fascinating is I got, again, to listen to her talk time after time about injustices of the criminal justice system, but she's in charge of it. She holds the purse strings for the judiciary, the state's attorney, the jails, and the defense attorneys. She runs the criminal justice system here in Chicago, and she's complaining about it. If you think it's working, then just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah. Any either candidate you think stronger on the taxation issue? I mean, we got crazy property tax. It's on a county level. The city has no shortage of new taxes popping up, and somebody had asked the question, one or the other better on taxation?
Does sugar tax ring a bell?
Yeah.
I mean,
I wasn't going to answer the question, but
that's a pretty easy one. It's a
yeah,
pretty
they
easy
bump
one.
and set that one for you too.
Yeah, no, she and Preckwinkle has said that she will raise taxes.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's your answer right there.
Yeah, it's I don't make a lot of political social media posts just because I just don't. I had a post about taxes recently, and almost everybody agreed how overtaxed we are. And a couple people said, "Well, why wouldn't you pay those taxes? Pay for your fair share of taxes." I said, "I do pay for my fair share of taxes. Back off." But yeah, that was another question we had pop up.
I always liked that one when I was a police officer, and people would tell me that they pay my salary. And I'm like, well, I pay my taxes too.
Yeah,
And they're like,
you pay your own salary.
I didn't think of that.
You pay yourself every day.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always funny when somebody gets really mad about the whole tax thing, and I'm like, we all pay taxes. Trust me, I pay. John, any questions from you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I knew you had a couple. I have a few more left too, but
I do.
I want to include you in.
So you just dipping your toe in the water, so to speak. Things you learned as far as I'll sit at home and watch the debates, and they kind of go back and forth, and I have my own views on the media. But you being there, and I was astounded, and have been time and again, but this time, the amount of questions that would go to one person or another, and it was really, let's say there's 10 of you up there, and 3 people got 70%.
Oh, you noticed that too, huh?
And it was like, there were so many times I'm sitting there, and it's not even because you had been on the show, which, thank you. But still, I mean, even other people who I have no connection with, I'm thinking, I'm tuning in to hear what these people have to say. And I know what Tony and Lori, let's say, and Susan, it seemed like she was a big favorite. Because they had all kinds of press. I was tuning in because I wanted to hear.
Lori wasn't getting the press. As a matter of fact, the WGN debate, go back and take a look.
Okay.
I think there were 10 of us on the stage, and when they asked the law enforcement questions, they didn't answer the cop. They didn't ask the cop and the U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
They asked everybody else about
Astounding.
it. Yeah, they
It
asked
was-
everybody else.
yeah.
And Lori and I are sitting there looking at each other like
What the hell?
Am I visible here? And so, and I felt that there's such a gravitational pull that I was feeling after September when Rahm dropped out. Before September, when Rahm was in, it was fine. I was ready to go toe-to-toe with this guy. No problem.
Yeah.
Easy,
Yeah.
right? But the game changed dramatically, and the tribal warfare started. Preckwinkle came with her clan. Daley came with his, Mendoza with hers, and Gary Chico has his, all at the same time. And, I made the joke that the 90s called and they wanted their politicians back. But, apparently that's just the way things go here. And the press, I can't tell you how many times, how many stories. Here's something I actually ask you guys to do, or somebody out there to do. Go back and look at the Tribune editorial board interview that I was on, because this one astounded me. They asked one question that was very specific, and they said, in the first year, what would you do to raise the $300 million that we need for the pension ramp that's coming in 2020?
Right.
And I ticked off 5 things that gave us $400,000 to $400 million. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
$400 million. And I put a price tag on each one.
Okay.
Right? 1-year moratorium on TIF spending, something called payment in lieu of taxation for nonprofits, parking ticket amnesty, so on and so forth. And I put a price tag on every one of those that we garnered each time we did that or could have done that. And it came out to $400 million. When they wrote the article the next day, and there were 4 of us in the room, I don't know if I think Lori was there, Amaro was there, and Jerry Joyce was there. He attacked me on crime. That's the first time I really got to know Jerry, who I've come to like, but I don't know what he was thinking. But take a look at the article, because what Bill Ruthard wrote the next day was, we asked a question about how would you raise the money to make that first pension payment in the first year, and none of the candidates gave a specific answer. And I was like, I couldn't be more specific. I couldn't be
I have
more
it
specific.
written down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dollar amounts.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, but the thing is, they videoed it. But nobody's watching the video. You're not going to watch a 2-hour video of 4 of us droning on about things like taxes
Right.
in schools and crime.
Yeah.
You're going to read the article, and that's what they took away from it. It's a bold-faced lie. So I don't know. The press here, I could just go on and on. I could go on and on. The Tribune also did something else that, to this day, I'm not going to get over this one.
Okay.
They actually, I spent 2 hours with 2 reporters explaining the facts behind the Laquan McDonald shooting, what I could and what I couldn't do, and how it played out.
Okay.
And they wrote a negative article, which, of course, I knew they were going to do.
Sure.
But the title of it was, McCarthy will not admit that Van Dyke committed a crime. This is after he was convicted. I said no such thing. But that was the title of it. But you know what they did? They refreshed the story every week, so that anytime you Googled me,
It would keep coming up.
The
It was the
SEO would
first-
push it back
the
up.
first story that would come up.
Oh, that's a cheap.
I mean, is that okay? First, it's not true. Second
Right.
of all, they obviously were doing that on purpose.
that is very agitated. I mean, I got agitated for you. That's such an agitating position to have to be in. I mean, it's John. I mean, we've talked about this a couple times about media just being such a rough, controlling arm of everything
Yes.
politics. And
Yes.
you had spoken, Gary, at a Chicago Association of Realtors event. I think it was a panel. And I didn't get to go to that. I was out of town. And John and I were going to go. I was out of town, so I couldn't get John the ticket because I was out of town. And I got a lot of text messages because you had been on the show prior to that. And everybody said that a lot of the candidates came off feeling like they had scripted. More than one person said it felt scripted until Gary got up there and was very honest. And I feel like the fact that some candidates get 70, 80, 90, almost 100% of the screen time really takes away from somebody being able to just be honest. Because I got so many text messages that day when you spoke, and they said when he got the microphone, he was just candid, very honest, and we believed his plan. And it stinks that not only do you not get FaceTime, I didn't realize it was so negative to the fact that, yeah, everything's via Google now. So if you refresh it and you're the Trib and they have the best SEO, it just pops up to the top over and over again.
Yeah, it's exactly what they did. It's exactly what they did. You know,
That's tough.
and they did a documentary. There's a documentary that's been produced about this election. And when I described some of the issues that we were having, not just me, a lot of the other candidates, you know, they called it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse when they all jumped in.
Yeah.
But we were all having the same problem, and the documentarian actually said, "So why do you think that is?" And this was after I told the story of somebody going to see the guy who gave out the jobs on the Daily One, the what's the right word? Not nepotism officer. The the title itself is astonishing that it actually existed. It'll come to me. But and the guy told him, well, who sent you? And he said, nobody. And that's where that phrase of we don't want nobody sent. Yeah. And when they asked me, why did I think that was happening in the press? I said, well, nobody sent me. That's why. Nobody sent me.
Right.
Was the fact that it was happening surprising, or just the magnitude of it, I guess, surprising?
The whole stacked deck of the election system here. It's hard to surprise me anymore.
Yeah.
But
I figure.
It came clear why we are in the place where we are. For the life of me, and I'm certainly not an expert, and I've actually laid off the news a lot over the last 4 weeks since I
needed a little break.
I haven't. Yeah, they disgust me. And I for the life of me, I can't figure out how Lori Lightfoot broke through. I'm happy for her, because God forbid it was, what it could have been, which God only knows. But at least Lori had the moxie to get into this race while Ron was running also.
Yeah.
And that's a bright line for a lot of us.
Well, if it wasn't for Lori, the runoff would essentially be with Daley, right? Be Tony and Daley.
I think he came in third, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised he wasn't in the runoff. I was surprised Lori wasn't first, but now that you've explained a lot of the background, pleasantly surprised at least she came in first. But I imagine Tony and Daley were going to end up being in that runoff.
Yeah, well, that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's not the case. And
I think
there's some thoughts
Chicago
on that.
is kind of done with Daley's.
Well,
at least another generation.
There's a very strong rumor that one of the power brokers in the state put up a different candidate who sucked a lot of votes out of Daley. And Daley has publicly blamed that guy, Jerry Joyce, for him not being the mayor right now. And it's entirely possible.
I don't know.
But
I never met Joyce.
Truth be known, well, I happen to like him. We got off to a rough start, but so be it. But in all honesty, I like Bill Daley, but he never even gave any policies. He got on TV and said, I'm going to have a plan on day one to fix things.
Right.
It's time to shake things up. It's like, really?
That was Rauner. He said
Really?
that for the governor mansion 4 years ago.
Well,
we're going to shake up Springfield.
Well,
yeah, I mean, he ran with a name, which probably helped get a long way. But to me, again, the words power broker and the kind of tribal warfare and how much they can control media and how much money behind unions backing each candidate, to me is insane. I mean, we all assume it exists, but it's not refreshing. It's I guess confirming now talking to you and listening to your experiences, and we appreciate the candidness because we always assume it. John and I sit back here before the show starts and leading up to the election, we just assume there's a lot of gamesmanship at a very high level. But hearing it from you is sad, but also kind of confirming of what we continue to believe.
Yeah.
It doesn't...
it's going to make the book a little better.
Yeah. Are you in the process?
It's kind of.
Yeah?
Yeah, I got somebody
Chapter
working
1?
on it. No, this has been going on for a long time. I had a lot of experiences before I got here.
Yeah.
I think that every police officer on earth can write a book.
Yeah.
Because
I can imagine.
You see things that the normal person doesn't see.
Sure.
And, then you throw in things like how we turned New York around, and then my trip to Newark, and then my trip here. And
September 11th. I mean,
September 11th, yeah.
There for that.
Literally, I've managed, and that's not the right word, riots, blackouts. Believe it or not, a hurricane. It's actually a funny story because I was the hurricane coordinator for Brooklyn South, and my house got destroyed, and all we had was some wind in Brooklyn South. That's probably the reason why I'm divorced. But, all of these experiences, they were a big deal.
Yeah. Managing
the Democratic National Convention in, I think it was 92. Just a lot of unbelievable experience. And then you throw in something like a 9/11 on top of it.
Yeah.
Oof.
There's a book right there, that 9/11.
And you never went to an easy place to affect change. I mean, New York City, when you went there, we spoke about it last time, the crime rate was astonishing, and you reduced it dramatically, went through September 11th. Newark was a difficult place to impact change. You impact change. And then Chicago, obviously, we've talked about it. It's a virtually impossible place to impact change. And on the crime front, you did an incredible job and then continued to try to affect change. So, you know, you said something about being lucky or being in the right place. I always use the quote, it's not being in the right place at the right time. You have to be the right person in the right place at the right time. And I think that's the key that most people miss. And you were the right person there in Newark, and then Chicago. We were very bummed at the end of the first election that it turned out the way it did. Even if it was, I listened to the speech you gave when you conceded, and I listened to all of them. I was up listening to everybody and listening to your concession speech. It was definitely the most heartfelt. I told John the day after, and I think you had missed it, and I tried to explain it to you. Mm-hmm. I said, I watched every single person slowly start to concede, and watching yours, you could tell you genuinely wanted to affect change. And everybody else said, well, I lost, best of luck to whoever makes it to the runoff, and see you later. Because one of the big things that you mentioned, I didn't think about in hindsight when I was watching it, is you really, not only did you put a year of effort in, you risked your own business, family's livelihood, and everything to run for a year and attempted to affect change. So it was very heartfelt. And I don't know if you watched all of them, but I was watching them in kind of real time as they were happening. And yours, and I'm not saying this because you've been on the show twice now, but it was the most genuine one out of the entire bunch. And I think it came through to more people than just me, because you could tell you just wanted to affect change. So it'll be cool to read the book, because successful people typically, when they leave one thing being successful, they can go be successful somewhere else. But you've done it, obviously, in the police world and now in the business world. So I'm excited to read the book.
Thanks.
When it comes out. I'm sure it'll be candid too, which is fun to listen to.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we can get it done. But I've certainly got some very funny stories.
You should just get a reality TV show.
That could happen too.
That would be a fun one. Do you imagine following Garry around with a camera?
That could happen too. I mean, I was the guy, seriously, when I was a young officer, that the old timers didn't want to work with, because stupid things just happen all the time. Yeah. Some stuff that just you can't. The reality of them is better than if I tried to make them up.
Yeah,
you just can't believe it. And, But then the other thing, Mo, that you mentioned, and I wear that as a badge of honor, that I haven't had an easy assignment. When I became a police officer, I was going to college with a guy whose father was a captain in the NYPD, and he told me, Garry, when you finish your training, he said, let me know what precinct you want to go to, because my dad says he could probably get you to whatever precinct you want to go to. So when I finished my training, I called him up, Howie Kaplan, and I said, hey, Howie. I said, I finished my training. I want to go to the 46th precinct. He goes, 4-6. I said, right. He says, okay, great. I'll tell my dad. He calls me back like 20 minutes later, and he says, did you say 4-6? And I said, yeah. He says, my dad wants to know if you actually took the psychological exam to come on the job, because nobody asks to go to the 4-6. All you have to do is screw up, and you'll end up there, because that's where they put you. But I got to tell you, it was the best decision that I made in my police career, because I went to one of the busiest precincts in the busiest neighborhoods in the Bronx, and I learned the job from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And I always say, if you're going to own a restaurant, you have to start by working in the kitchen.
Yep.
So if you go to a slow precinct and then you make sergeant and you go to a busy precinct, you're going to be a bag of nerves. And I mean, I'm kind of proud of, in the middle of crisis, I'm very calm. I'm very, very calm.
I can see that.
And I've had so many crises that it's just become part of me. I got sent to precinct after precinct after crisis happened. Like the first precinct I went to, well, actually the first place I went as a captain was to internal affairs, because we had a major corruption scandal, and they were putting legitimate police officers into internal affairs to legitimize it. Then I got my first precinct, and it was the only nice place that I ever worked in my police career, the Upper West Side of Manhattan. But then there was a bad police shooting in the 33rd precinct. Guess who becomes the commanding officer there? Then after that, there was the Abner Louima scandal in Brooklyn, where a Haitian immigrant was sodomized by some police officers in the bathroom. Well, guess who went there?
Wow.
after that scandal. You know, so and then, you know, I just amazing stuff, and I wouldn't change a damn thing.
Well, it speaks to your bravery to go take on those situations, because when those
or silliness.
well, because when they go wrong, the buck stops at you each time. It you know, it's going to come back to you. But your management skill.
I want to give you
Yeah.
a prediction. The Kim Fox case is going to fall on the first deputy,
Okay.
because that's what we do here.
Yeah. Okay.
Joe Maggette, who is supposed to be a phenomenal guy. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Yeah, no.
you.
I like the prediction. I mean, I don't like the prediction, but I'm glad you made the prediction, because when it comes true, we're going to say Gary told you so.
Mm-hmm.
We'll play the clip.
That's what we do.
John asked, but we did discuss it. He goes, if you don't mind, if you haven't asked Gary yet, can you please ask him on thoughts on the state's attorney's handling of the JS case?
Yep.
Scroll back about 10, 15, 20 minutes, John, and your answer's there. We discussed it quite a bit.
We did.
You know, your management skills, because each of those situations, I mean, we can't, John and I, or the audience as lay people, can't understand what it would take to go into each one of those situations, look at it as a completely new situation. Because for you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, policing is different everywhere, and every situation is going to be a little bit different, and you have to go in there, take a tough situation, manage it appropriately, fix it, and then they move you on to another really crappy situation to have to fix. Do you find that management skill set that you've gained has been really good transitioning into the business world?
Well, we learned business management of policing, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
So that's
Reverse
what
almost.
I'm doing here. But the other thing that you didn't mention, Mo, that's very important to me is also leadership.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a manager and a leader. And when you can manage and lead at the same time, that's a whole different game. I mean, look, I got a lot of kudos here for what I did during the NATO summit, right? Because I was out there on the front line with the troops. But in the culture that I come from, there's no place in the world that I could have possibly been except in the middle of that if I'm making the calls on the ground while things are happening. I'm not going to be hiding in a command center somewhere. You know, during protests in New York and in Newark, I was always out there, and same thing here in Chicago. So leadership is very important to me. I studied leadership, and leadership translates into everything.
Yeah.
Right? It's the way you treat people. It's giving people a voice. Every time I took over a new precinct, everybody who worked in that precinct, I made them come into my office for at least a couple of minutes, tell me about themselves, tell me what I could do to make their lives better. Then I would tell them about me and what my expectations were for them. So, you know, leadership translates to a lot of different places, and you have to treat people with respect. And that's not what we do here. That's not what we do here. So, you know, it bothers me that I think that I have a skill set that may be going to waste now. But maybe it's time to stop being Peter Pan and grow up and realize that I got to kind of stop playing in the world that I love to do, and, you know, get serious and try and take care of my family.
Well, you've done a lot to impact a lot of lives. Obviously, your leadership has, I'm sure, been looked up to by a lot of people in Chicago, in New York, in Newark. I don't think it's been wasted. I think I'm sure there's so many people in not just this city in New York, Newark, everywhere, who've been impacted by your leadership, your change, and your ability to take on big risks, even when sometimes, like you said, the risks might have been, like you said, silly. I think your word was silly risks. But you've impacted a lot of people's lives. So I don't think it's gone wasted. And I think whether it's being a public servant, I won't say a politician, or a business person, or obviously a family man, you're going to be able to affect a lot of change no matter what you're doing. Yeah, and John,
I've got a few.
You got a few?
I do.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You're looking at me with, John has a whiteboard and he writes love letters to me. So sometimes.
I like to call them director's notes, but you apparently have a crush on me and you want them to be love notes. That's fine.
So we have one question, and I think Gary answered part of it. Michael Bizzoni said, why has voter turnout been so low? You worked the city, and it seems to me turnout would have been better. Follow-up question, will voter turnout this time be better or worse?
I'll answer the second one first, which I think it's going to be worse.
Worse.
I hear so many people saying that they don't like either candidate and they're not going to vote. So I think it's going to be worse. The low voter turnout, I think, happened for a number of reasons. I think the first reason is voter apathy. We've learned here that you could vote and vote and vote, and it doesn't matter. You're going to get what you're going to be fed no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? So that's first of all. Second of all, too many candidates. People couldn't make up their minds. Too much noise around it. It was hard for anybody to break through the pack. So there's a number of reasons for it, but the number one reason is apathy. And it's really troubling that the politics of this city serves the politicians. It doesn't serve the people who are putting people in office. Mm-hmm. It serves the people who are in office, which is why everybody wanted that job after Rahm dropped out. And I think that leads to voter apathy. So I think that's the biggest issue.
Michael, there's your answer, buddy.
Boom. There we go.
John's got questions.
Yeah, just a couple. Well, a few. I know we talked about Tony and a lot of different things, but one of the things that she was all over you about, and I know about it, but I haven't heard you talk on end about it. The whole Laquan McDonald thing. Now, I shouldn't say a thing. It was a horrible situation, but from your perspective and what you could do or couldn't do, could you lay that out a little bit so that people watching can get
Sure.
your point of view?
And I've done this so many times, I think I could do it almost in a succinct fashion.
You've never been asked this question before,
Yeah,
right? John?
Right? Well, I just told you I spent 2 hours explaining it to the Tribune, and they still screwed it up.
That's why
which is on purpose. And
we will not edit this out. We want to hear it.
so
You know where John works if he does.
That's true.
I could get you guys off the roof here. But the fact is, right now, Eddie Johnson is not in charge of the discipline system of the Chicago Police Department, and neither was I as the superintendent. If I wanted to fire somebody, I can only make a recommendation to the police board. And during that time frame that I was superintendent, the police board overturned my separation recommendations 75% of the time.
Wow.
So here I am. I want to fire somebody, and the civilians, who are supposed to be the overseers, aren't letting me do it. So that's a bad business model, because I'm obviously accountable for everybody's behavior, but I'm not in charge of the discipline.
Right. You can't.
So how
affect
can
the
I
change.
affect the change? Right. So that's the first thing. That's a failed system. Accountability without authority. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. The second thing is I was not in charge of the investigation into use of force for CPD, as Eddie Johnson is today. These flawed systems still exist because they serve the politicians. If you keep the ground muddy, you can't tell what happened. And that's why this is so frustrating for me. So I'm not in charge of the investigation. That was done by, at the time it was Independent Police Review Authority. They changed it now they changed IPRA to COPA, so it must be much, much better now since they changed the name.
Yes.
Now it's the Civilian Office of Police Accountability. They're in charge of the investigation. The cover-up of I could take exactly one step by Illinois state law, because what we do here in Illinois is we take contractual obligations, we go to Springfield, and we make them into laws. It happens over and over and over again. CTU does it, the police unions do it, and in this case, I could only put Jason Van Dyke on paid desk duty. That's the one step that I could take.
Really?
That's all I could do. I couldn't fire him. I wasn't in charge of the investigation. But here's the kicker, and I only learned this after about 6 or 8 months after I was fired. No, it was longer than that. A year later, Steve Patton, in January of 2017, Steve Patton resigns. No, 2016. January of 2016, Steve Patton, who's the corporation counsel, resigns. And when he resigns, he does an exit interview with Fran Spielman from the Sun-Times, and he says to her, "When I saw that video, I knew then, and I believe it's been borne out now, that it was a case of murder." And I said to myself, well, how did the corporation counsel then get the city council to sign off on giving $5 million of taxpayer money when an officer committed a murder, right? And this being Chicago, when I articulated that to enough people, one day I went to work, and what landed on my desk was Steve Patton's testimony in front of the City Council Finance Committee, which happened in, ironically, early April of 2015, when Ron was in the runoff with Chuy Garcia. And here's the circumstances. The family of Laquan McDonald approached the city around March 28th. And by April 7th or 8th, Patton is in front of the city council with a settlement for a lawsuit that wasn't filed. They never filed a complaint.
Whoa.
So what we have is Patton going to the city council, describing the entirety of the video, and he tells them that there was no complaint filed, but we give money away like this all the time when a complaint isn't filed. He describes the actions of every one of the officers. He doesn't tell the city council that there's a caveat in the agreement not to release the video. And that was done to prevent the video from coming out before the runoff election, which probably would have pulled the rug out from under Rahm Emanuel.
Yep.
So there's a crime that's called official misconduct, which has it that a public official or agent of the government, when they do something they're not supposed to do to benefit themselves or somebody else, it's called official misconduct. So now that Van Dyke has been convicted, now that the trumped-up charges against the 3 officers for conspiracy, which, by the way, many people missed this one, but Patricia Brown Holmes, the defense attorney for Jesse Smollett, was the special prosecutor that was appointed in that case that brought the charges against the 3 officers that was just dismissed. And they're considering suing for malicious prosecution. It's an evil cabal. And by the way, she actually donated to Preckwinkle and Kim Fox campaigns.
Really?
Yeah, this is all coincidence, I'm sure. Right?
Oh, of course.
Right? But the bottom line is Steve Patton committed a crime of official misconduct by giving away a $5 million payment. And when I describe to people that it's on the civil side, they don't understand what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I first have to explain that I had no control over the criminal investigation in the first place.
Let alone the civil.
So, I mean, that's the circumstances of how this thing happened. That's why I've now asked the state attorney general to investigate the circumstances of the cover-up, because that's the story.
Sure.
And go lock them up.
It's astonishing to me because obviously the media, and we've said this a couple times already, can influence a story whatever which way they want. That you only had the ability to put them on desk leave. I mean, it's crazy because I mean, obviously everybody looks to you to affect a change that you're, no pun intended, handcuffed from doing. You can't do it.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. I didn't even know that, but a lot of people do not understand the difference between a criminal case and a civil case and the fact that 2 of them can happen together. But it's astonishing to me. I didn't know that.
First of all, there is not a case in the city of Chicago that got brought to the city and turned around in less than 2 weeks. It's simply, I refuse to
Judicial
believe
process doesn't work that way.
that it's going to happen.
Right.
Especially without filing a suit. The only reason it happened that quickly is what I just described, the politics.
Yeah, it's well, John definitely wanted to talk about the politics of politics.
I wanted to talk about the politics of politics.
As I sit here and I digest it, and I'm sure I'll go home and digest some more of it.
Yep.
It's what we thought it was times a lot. What's that? It's a TV show I used to watch. It's like I forget
I have no idea.
It's
You just reminded me of the title of that guy who said, we don't want nobody
says.
The patriarch officer.
I see.
There was somebody in city government called the patriarch officer.
Really?
No, patronage officer. The patronage officer. In other words, this is a guy who gives out the jobs based upon patronage.
Unbelievable.
I believe that's illegal.
But I was watching some TV show, and I don't know why it's slipping my mind. It's getting late, and I'm tired. No, and it was talking about how, like, at the presidential level, how much corruption there is, and how much gamesmanship there is, and how much politic and political positioning there is. And we always assumed it's there in Chicago. Everybody jokes about Chicago politics, but hearing you talk about how much the media controls it, how much the unions do, how much there's a political machine, it's frightening. And it almost seems helpless from somebody's standpoint who wants change. And I'm sure it feels even more helpless for you who had to run against that. It's disappointing.
Yeah, I thought we were going to break through it. I really, really did, you know?
We were hoping. We were definitely hoping.
Yeah,
I got one more.
Yeah, you got one more?
Yeah, one more. And you touched on the gentleman's name that I'm about to bring up. You haven't been in the position that he is now, Eddie Johnson. I don't know what to think of him, and not that I really have a whole lot of reason to think a lot of him on a regular basis. But you being in that position, what's your take on where he's at? I mean, how he's doing with what he's dealing with. What is your take?
Look, I like Eddie. I promoted Eddie twice.
Okay.
I need to be clear about that.
Okay.
His style is not my style.
All right.
And I would have handled things incredibly differently. As a matter of fact, when he got the job and we spoke, I told him that he had an opportunity to hold the mayor's feet to the fire rather than the other way around.
Okay.
Especially since, and everybody forgets this, talk about the Chicago way. Rahm had the city council change the law for one day so he could appoint Eddie Johnson. Do you remember that? Nobody remembers that.
No.
It's a fact. The method by which the police superintendent is selected is defined by municipal law in Chicago. Police board does a search, national search. They give the mayor 3 candidates. If the mayor likes one, he selects them, gets them approved by the city council. If he doesn't like one of the 3, he throws out the search, and they do it all over again. And in this case, Rahm made the mistake of actually selecting a guy who's a good friend of mine. His name is Cedric Alexander. He's an African-American. He has a PhD in criminology, and he was the public safety director in DeKalb, Georgia. Now, why would Ron think I would know a guy from DeKalb, Georgia? Mm-hmm. Well, that's because I was vice president of the Major City Chiefs Association, and I know virtually everybody in the country. Cedric calls me and says, Gary, I got the job. I said, wow, that's great, Cedric. We got to talk. So this is on Friday afternoon. And he says, all right, I'm heading back to Georgia. He says, I'll be back next week for the announcement. Mm-hmm. He says, I'll come in the night before, we'll have dinner. I said, great. By Monday, Rahm had gone to the city council Black Caucus and said, hey, I selected the guy. He's African-American, Cedric Alexander. And the city council said, that's great. He's African-American, but he's not our African-American. And Eddie Johnson is a good guy.
What does that mean?
What does that mean? That means that they weren't going to back Cedric Alexander. They wanted an insider who they knew, and they suggested Eddie Johnson. Ooh. Eddie Johnson had not applied for the job. So you put all of those circumstances together, and the tomfoolery of changing the law for one day so Rahm could pick whoever he wants. If you don't like the checks and balances, throw them out. Change them for a day. If you don't like the fact that you have to petition a judge to be recused, just don't do it. Yeah. That's what we do around here.
Go to the Oscars.
Yeah, go to the Oscars. So with all of that in mind, I told Eddie, I said, Eddie, don't kowtow to this guy. Make him do the right thing and stand up to him. And he never did. And that's very disappointing for me. Okay. But worse than that, he did things that never should happen. When he marched on the Dan Ryan with Father Flager, he violated the law. If CPD is violating the law, how do we tell criminals you can't violate the law? Well, then again, nobody's getting held accountable, right? So it doesn't matter.
I'm going to go 100 on the way home.
Might as well.
Yeah. Tell him I know Gary. He said nobody's being held accountable.
Yeah, right.
The TV show was Scandal, by the way.
Oh, very good.
It came back. Somebody asked Gary, he says, Gary's the man. When was the last time he shaved his mustache?
June of 1977. My mustache is older than my wife.
You hear that, John?
That was the day I graduated Cardinal Spellman High School, and I actually have a picture of that day on my phone just for the hell of it.
That's awesome. When was the last time you shaved it? Is it every morning thing?
No.
Little trim?
Like just to trim it?
Oh, no, I buzz it.
Buzz it?
Once a week.
But you've never totally shaved it off since then?
No. June of 1977.
Wow.
The day I graduated Cardinal Spellman. was the last
That's
day I shaved
awesome.
my upper lip.
He said savage.
I was thinking of doing it for charity at some point. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah. That we got to raise a ton of money for that.
Yeah,
I once said I would shave my head for charity, didn't raise any money.
yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to shave it.
Shut
But
up, really?
Yeah. What, are you going to offer money for me to shave my head?
Yeah, St. Baldrick's.
is
Next
that?
March.
Okay.
Oh, you don't know about St. Baldrick's?
No.
I'm
Yeah.
afraid to shave my head because I got gaps that may not return.
Well,
Although,
I
I got to tell you, I'm really happy with the amount of hair that I still have. I'm almost 60. Both of my brothers, by the time they were 30, were bald.
No kidding, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're not going to bald.
No. No, you're
No,
set.
you're set.
All right,
You're set.
good.
It'll recede, but you won't bald.
You could always do a John and just
Well, I'm not
comb
gonna-
everything over the front.
I'm not going to get remarried, I can tell you that. So it doesn't matter. If I go bald, I go bald.
What do we got? I think back when Bo Derek was, Pinup Girl of the Year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, yeah.
1977.
Yeah.
Somehow John knows that.
The movie 10?
Well, I mean, John has these
Oh,
facts
Demetrios
like that.
is- yeah.
Demetrios, who's a fan of the show, he somehow has those facts.
No, yeah. Bo
Did
Derek
you end up
is
taking a
good
little
man.
vacation after the
No,
election? No?
no.
You're due one then.
Yeah.
But you got a little one, so.
Yeah, we got a 2-year-old, and he kind of takes up a lot of time. I did do some cathartic woodwork, building some stuff in the house. So,
Yeah?
Yeah. I get a lot of pleasure out of
Good
it.
hobby
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah. When I got fired, I built the benches on my deck.
Really?
When this happened, I'm building a back bar for the upstairs.
It's all fun
Nice.
stuff. It all leads to a
Yeah,
good time.
right.
Yeah, no doubt. We've got a great, private deck, southern exposure, so might as well make the most of it.
We're drinking at Gary's next time.
Boom.
Maybe.
Yeah, we might get the invite. Somebody said, "Oh boy, Mo bald would be awesome." No, I got a big egg head. It's deceiving. I shaved my head one time. I got a terrible head. Every time I've ever been fit for a helmet, they say, "What are you, a medium?" I'm like, "No, a large is tight on me." And then I put a large on, and it's nice and tight. So I don't look good bald. But I don't think I'm balding either.
No. I don't think you are.
I did shave my head sophomore year of high school for football.
You're still playing?
No, I stopped at 50.
Yeah, that's right. You said that last time.
I stopped at 50.
Fair.
And
Yeah.
I feel it every day, trust me.
No, you're in good shape.
Yeah, but the knees, the joints, everything else hurts.
Are you working out now?
Oh,
that
hell
you have
yeah.
more free time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm back in a big way.
Awesome. Well, we kept you for a long time, and we appreciate your time again. Today was informative for me on a very high level. It's a lot of things that I thought were likely happening, but you took it and you explained it at a higher level for us. Obviously, personally, very disappointed the election turned out the way it did, but like we said, I don't think Chicago was ready for change, and we really appreciate how candid you've been, but also how much you've brought to light for me, John, everybody listening, and everybody who listened to you on the campaign. So many things that hopefully Chicago and hopefully Lori, if she wins tomorrow, will at least take in the right direction. Because I think forward motion in any which way at this point is a step in the right direction. So thanks again for coming on. I mean, you've taken a lot of time to talk to us. Like I said at the top of the show and the last time you were on, we're a tiny little operation, and Garry coming on and giving us his time last time and his time again really shows to me, and I know everybody who reached out after the show, they're like, "Oh, you had Garry on." And, I said to everybody and anybody who would listen, he really did want to talk to everybody and the average person.
Yep.
And John and I tried nonstop to get other people on the show, and not a single person.
Nope.
We had one confirm and then cancel, which was almost worse because he threw us for a loop. Really upsets John. Keeps him up at night still. But it really showed your true character, and I'm excited to see what you do with the businesses and the woodworking and working out and all that good stuff. And if you write the book, I can't wait to read it.
Yeah. There'll be some stories in there that you're just going to shake your head at.
I can now getting to know you the last couple months. I can imagine there'll be fun stories and candid stories.
Yes.
Which is always fun. John, anything from you?
No, I think we covered a lot, and thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate it. We'll
pleasure,
keep in
John.
touch. Absolutely. Come back anytime you want. I know you and I talk somewhat, not on a regular basis, but
John's
pretty
going to call
often.
you every day going forward. Hi,
go.
Gary. How are you?
There we
What
go.
are you doing now? What are
Yeah.
you doing now?
What are you doing now?
Yeah,
Can we hang out?
No, but yeah, anytime. I'm going to assume with the conversation we've had, you're hoping for and expecting a Lori victory.
Oh,
tomorrow.
absolutely. Yeah. The alternative, first of all, I have respect for Laurie,
Okay.
but the alternative is just too difficult to comprehend.
Very good. Okay. So that's the hoping part, but just looking at the polls and such, I mean, Lori, to the best of my knowledge, has a pretty big.
Yeah, everything I've heard has her leading, but, crazier things have happened.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so turn out and vote tomorrow, people. I mean,
Yeah.
Gary made a good point, that whole, it doesn't matter, who wins, lesser of two evils that we spoke about is not an excuse not to go out and vote.
No.
Affect some change. I mean, any forward motion is a step
Something.
in the right direction.
Yeah. Got to get involved. Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you so much again,
Yeah.
Gary.
All right, guys.
Are you going to do the Wednesday graphic, John?
Oh, yeah.
Because we have a show in 2 days. Usually it's a week later.
I know. We do. We have a great show actually coming up on Wednesday, 3 o'clock as normal. We have Joseph Toda, who, this guy is a riot. He owns a couple of places, but the Red Arrow Tap Room, it's out in the burbs, and it is a self-serve beer bar where I'll let him explain it, but you can go and try a bunch of different things. You only get charged for what you try. So I know when I'm out, if something is on tap, I'll try it. But if it's a new beer and it's in a bottle, I don't know if I'm going to like it. I don't want the whole thing. He set it up so you can just try a bunch and just buy it by the ounce. You can try
Wow.
this, that, and the other. Oh, super.
That's a
super
novel
good guy.
idea.
Yeah,
It's a quick way to get drunk.
it is indeed. But we also have the second half of the Polar Vortex show.
Yes.
We have John Porter. He is the founder of the Chicago Pizza Tour.
Oh, cool.
He's coming on. So another great personality. It's going to be a really fun show. So we got beer and we got pizza. And I
Are they
believe-
bringing beer and pizza on?
Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
You gave Gary crappy wine from the cooler, and we're gonna.
But yeah, we'll see. We
Cool.
might indulge.
And we're out of
a
our
little
diets now, so we can do that.
bit. Exactly. And speaking of that, I believe on a previous show, speaking of the challenge, you made me a bet. Whoever beats
did.
you or I has to take the other one on the Chicago Pizza Tour.
That's right,
So
he beat
you
me.
and I even said
I had
was it
no
like a
Gary.
date?
I did not think John was going to beat me in a fitness challenge. Kudos to you. Hats off to you.
Thank you,
You
sir.
beat me.
He gave me shit about my age. Oh,
I just
you
and
can't
I'm
do
a
blah, blah, blah.
lunatic competitor, so I came in second to John. So
Yeah.
congratulations, buddy.
So-
And a bet's a bet.
A bet's a bet. So
We'll go
we're
on a
gonna.
pizza
I'm gonna
tour.
bring that up to John to make sure that he holds you accountable.
You got it. If he doesn't, you will.
I will. But no, that's
Cool.
That's all we got.
Awesome. So we'll see you guys Wednesday at 3 o'clock in 2 days. Thank you again to Gary. This was informative, disappointing informative, but informative. And I really appreciate the time. Can't thank you enough. It's an honor for
My
me
pleasure,
and John.
guys. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Absolutely. In 3, 2, 1.